Hey warrior, there's a quiet, invisible line inside every person, the line that separates who you truly are from what the world slowly pressures you to become. Most of us cross it without noticing. We bend a little to avoid conflict. We shrink a little to fit into rooms that don't feel right. We stay silent when something doesn't sit well in our chest because being accepted feels easier than being honest. And then one day you realize you've been living for comfort that isn't yours, carrying expectations that don't belong to you. The Stoics spoke about this inner line as the boundary of your character. If you've ever walked away from a moment thinking, "I should have spoken up," or felt the weight of holding yourself back just to keep things smooth, this conversation is for you. We're going to explore how Stoic principles help you stop trading your self-respect for approval, how to stand your ground without becoming aggressive, and how to carry yourself with a quiet confidence that doesn't need to be loud to be real. Stoicism teaches that you may not control how people react to you, but you always control how you show up to yourself. And that choice, made daily, becomes the difference between living on your knees for comfort and standing on your feet with dignity. If these conversations speak to something real in you, something grounded in truth, philosophy, and inner growth, consider subscribing. It's a small gesture, but it helps us reach more minds like yours. And it quietly signals that you're walking this path with intention. Lesson 1. Stop explaining yourself to everyone. It usually starts with a feeling you can't quite name, a tightness in your chest when someone questions your choice, a rush to fill the silence when your decision isn't immediately accepted. You hear yourself adding reasons, details, justifications you were never asked for. And afterward, there's that small, uncomfortable thought. Why did I feel the need to explain all of that? Most of us don't notice how often we do this. We think we're being polite. We think we're being clear. But a lot of the time, we're quietly asking for permission to be ourselves. Stoicism invites you to notice this pattern without judging yourself for it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about guarding the sovereignty of the mind, because once you let other people's reactions dictate your inner stance, your peace becomes fragile. The moment you feel that urge to explain everything, that's your cue to pause and remember that your choices do not need a jury. Over-explaining doesn't come from confidence. It usually comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being disliked, fear of standing alone in your decision. You tell yourself that if you just say a little more, people will finally get it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. People who want to understand you will do so with very little explanation, and people who are committed to misunderstanding you will do so no matter how clearly you speak. The Stoics believed that you cannot control how others receive your actions, only how you act. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by events, but by the stories we tell ourselves about them. When you feel the need to justify yourself, the story often sounds like this: if they don't approve, I must be wrong. That story quietly lowers you. There is a difference between clarity and apology. Clarity is stating your choice with calm. Apology is explaining your choice until it sounds like a mistake. You can say, "This is what I'm doing," without turning it into a defense speech. You can set a boundary without giving a long backstory. You can say no without listing every reason your no is reasonable. Seneca wrote that a person who depends on the approval of others will never be at peace, because peace built on external permission is always unstable. When you over-explain, you're handing your calm to someone else's reaction. You're saying, "My decision only stands if you agree with it." Stoicism asks you to reverse that. Your decision stands because it aligns with your values. Agreement is optional. This doesn't mean you become cold or dismissive. It means you become grounded. There are moments when explanation is healthy, when you're teaching, when you're building trust, when someone is genuinely open to understanding. But there's a big difference between explaining to connect and explaining to be accepted. The first is rooted in generosity. The second is rooted in insecurity. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When you keep looking outward for validation, you stay asleep to your own authority. When you start listening to your inner compass, you wake up to the fact that you don't need constant permission to move forward. Think about how often you replay conversations in your head. You rewrite what you said. You imagine better arguments. You wish you had explained yourself more clearly. That replay loop is your mind trying to regain control over a moment that already passed. Stoicism teaches you to release that loop. You cannot edit the past, but you can train your response in the present. Next time you feel the urge to over-explain, try something simple. Take one breath, then answer with one clear sentence. Let it stand. Notice how your body reacts when you don't add extra layers. It might feel uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is just your old habit losing its grip. Over time, something shifts when you stop explaining yourself to everyone. You begin to trust your own judgment. You stop performing your decisions for an audience. You move with more quiet confidence. People may still question you. That's fine. Questioning is not control unless you let it be. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that you can always choose to remain untroubled by other people's opinions. That doesn't mean you ignore feedback. It means you weigh it against your values instead of against your fear of disapproval. When you live like that, your words become simpler. Your presence becomes steadier. You don't rush to defend your choices because you're no longer at war with them inside yourself. There's also a deeper layer here that changes how you relate to your own worth. When you constantly explain yourself, you send yourself a message, "I don't trust me yet." When you speak plainly and move forward, you send a different message, "I stand by my choices." That inner message matters. Carl Jung warned that what we do not bring into consciousness controls us from the shadows. Over-explaining is often an unconscious attempt to control how we're seen. Once you see that pattern, you can choose differently. You can let people misunderstand you and still move forward. You can allow silence to exist without filling it with self-justification. That's not a weakness. That's self-respect in motion. This practice will feel awkward at first. You'll catch yourself starting to explain and then stopping mid-sentence. You'll feel the pull to add one more reason, one more detail, one more apology. That's okay. Stoicism is not about getting it right every time. It's about noticing sooner. Each time you choose clarity over explanation, you strengthen a quiet muscle inside yourself. You become someone who speaks with intention, not pressure. And when you live that way long enough, something changes in how people experience you. They start to sense your certainty, not because you're loud, not because you're forceful, but because you're no longer asking for permission to be who you are. Lesson 2. Never compete for someone's attention. It usually starts in small, almost invisible ways. You check your phone more often than you need to. You wait a little too long for a reply. You read meaning into silence. You find yourself doing extra, giving extra, saying yes when you're tired, just so someone will notice you, choose you, or keep you close. None of this feels dramatic in the moment. It feels normal. It feels human. But over time, that quiet habit trains your mind to believe that your worth depends on someone else's attention. And that belief slowly drains your power. Stoicism teaches that your value is not created by being chosen. It is revealed by choosing yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes colored by the quality of its thoughts. If your thoughts are always circling around, do they see me? Do I matter to them? Your inner world starts to take on the color of need. And need is heavy to carry. When you compete for someone's attention, you place yourself in a race you never agreed to run. You start measuring your worth by responses, reactions, and small signs of approval. A fast reply feels like validation. A delayed reply feels like rejection. And suddenly, your mood is being decided by something as small as a notification. Epictetus warned that if someone can provoke your emotions, they gain power over you. Attention works the same way. When you let someone else's attention determine how you feel about yourself, you hand them the keys to your inner state. That's not connection, that's dependency. Stoicism invites you to notice this pattern without judging yourself for it. You're not weak for wanting to be seen. You're human. The work is in not letting that desire control how you move through the world. There's also a deeper layer to chasing attention that most people don't talk about. It quietly shifts your behavior. You start saying things you don't fully mean just to keep the interaction going. You soften your boundaries so you don't lose the person. You overgive, overlisten, over-accommodate, hoping that effort will turn into importance. But effort does not create respect. Respect grows from consistency and self-respect. Seneca wrote that no one is crushed by misfortune unless they have first been deceived by prosperity. In the same way, no one is diminished by distance unless they have first been deceived by attention. Temporary attention can feel like proof of worth, but when it fades, it leaves you feeling smaller than before. Psychology points to something similar. Carl Jung said, "What you seek outside of yourself is already within you." When you chase attention, you're often trying to fill a gap inside with something external. You want reassurance that you matter. You want confirmation that you're seen. But no amount of outside attention can permanently settle that inner question. The moment the attention shifts, the old doubt comes back. Stoicism doesn't tell you to stop caring about people. It teaches you to stop outsourcing your sense of worth to them. You can enjoy being chosen without making being chosen the measure of your value. Think about the people you respect most in your life. They don't chase. They don't perform for attention. They move with a certain calm presence. They focus on their work, their values, their growth. And because they're not trying to be seen, they are seen. That's not a trick. It's a natural result of not bending yourself to fit into someone else's frame. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to be content with acting rightly, regardless of whether anyone noticed. When you shift your focus from "do they see me" to "am I living in line with my values?" your energy changes. You become grounded instead of reaching. And grounded energy is quietly magnetic. This doesn't mean you become cold, distant, or unavailable. It means you become selective. You stop trying to win attention from people who don't show up with the same care. You stop investing deeply in spaces where your presence is treated as optional. Epictetus taught that we should concern ourselves only with what is within our control. You can't control who values you. You can control where you place your time, your attention, and your emotional energy. When you remove yourself from the race for attention, you're not rejecting others. You're choosing not to compete for something that should be freely given. There's a quiet freedom that comes with this shift. You stop checking your phone with tension in your chest. You stop reading into every pause. You stop shrinking your needs so you won't seem too much. You start to feel more at ease in your own company, and when someone chooses to meet you there, it feels lighter, not like relief from fear, but like genuine connection. Seneca believed that true friendship is rooted in virtue, not in need. When you stop competing for attention, the connections that remain are cleaner. They're not built on performance, they're built on mutual respect. This practice takes time. You will catch yourself reaching sometimes. You'll feel the old pull to prove your worth, to earn attention, to be chosen. When that happens, pause, take a breath. Ask yourself a simple question. Would I still do this if I didn't need their approval? That question alone can bring you back to your center. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you make your need for attention conscious, you stop being driven by it in secret. You gain the power to choose a different response. Over time, this changes how you show up in every area of your life. In relationships, you become more secure. In work, you stop performing for praise and start focusing on quality. In social spaces, you feel less pressure to be interesting and more freedom to be real. Stoicism teaches that your inner freedom grows when your peace no longer depends on being seen by others. You begin to carry yourself with a quiet certainty that doesn't need constant reflection from someone else's eyes. And when you live like that, attention becomes something you can appreciate when it comes, not something you chase when it doesn't. Lesson 3. Learn to walk away without warning. Most people stay in situations longer than they should, not because they feel good there, but because leaving feels uncomfortable. There's a strange pressure to be patient, to give it more time, to not give up too easily. And sometimes patience is wise, but sometimes what we call patience is really fear wearing a polite mask. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being alone, fear of looking like the bad person for choosing yourself. Stoicism doesn't tell you to burn bridges for every small mistake. It teaches you to recognize patterns. When something repeatedly drains your peace, your energy, and your self-respect, staying isn't strength. It's self-neglect. We're taught that strength looks loud. Argue back, prove your point, make them understand. But real strength often looks quiet. It looks like walking away without a speech, without a dramatic exit, without trying to convince someone of your worth one last time. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that you don't need to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for yourself is to remove yourself from a space that keeps asking you to shrink. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop announcing your boundaries and start honoring them. Warnings can turn into negotiations. If you don't change, I'll leave becomes an invitation for temporary behavior. Just enough effort to keep you around, just enough words to reset your hope. Then the pattern repeats. Stoicism points you toward action over talk. When you've already explained your boundary and nothing changes, your next step doesn't need more words, it needs movement. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Often we imagine leaving will be unbearable, the loneliness, the guilt, the awkward conversations. And then when we finally do leave, the reality is quieter than the fear we built in our minds. Walking away without warning isn't about punishing the other person. It's about protecting your own nervous system. Every time you stay in a space that drains you, your body learns that discomfort is normal. Your mind starts to believe that this is just how life is, but it doesn't have to be. Epictetus taught that while you can't control how others treat you, you can always control where you place yourself. That's not avoidance, that's wisdom. You choose environments that match your values. You don't keep standing in places that make you feel smaller. This lesson also forces you to face something uncomfortable about yourself. The part that hopes people will change. The part that believes if you explain one more time, give one more chance, show one more example of patience, things will finally be different. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." When you resist accepting reality as it is, you stay stuck inside it. You keep feeding patterns that don't feed you back. Walking away is sometimes the moment you stop resisting the truth and start aligning with it. There's grief in leaving, even when leaving is the right choice. You grieve the version of the relationship you hoped for. You grieve the potential you saw. You grieve the time you invested. Stoicism doesn't deny that grief. It teaches you to carry it without letting it chain you to a place that hurts. Marcus Aurelius wrote about meeting each moment as it is, not as you wish it to be. When you accept that some doors don't lead where you thought they would, you stop standing in front of them knocking with tired hands. Walking away without warning also builds self-trust. Each time you honor your own standard, you prove to yourself that your feelings matter. You stop outsourcing your worth to other people's reactions. You stop waiting for permission to choose peace. Over time, this changes your posture in life. You move with less desperation. You don't cling to situations that drain you. You become more selective with where you place your energy. Seneca warned that we waste much of our life by giving it to things that do not deserve it. This applies to places and people too. Your time and attention are pieces of your life. Choose where they go with care. There's also a quiet confidence that grows when you can leave without trying to control the story about you. Some people will misunderstand your silence. Some will tell their version of why you left. You don't need to correct every narrative. Epictetus taught that you are not harmed by what others think, but by what you think about their thoughts. When you stop chasing approval on your way out, you reclaim your inner space. You let people hold their opinions while you hold your peace. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached from everyone. It means you become honest about what you can tolerate. You stop confusing endurance with virtue. You stop calling self-abandonment being nice. Carl Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. Becoming who you truly are often requires leaving places that only accept the version of you that stays small. Over time, this practice reshapes your life. You start choosing environments that support your growth. You build relationships where respect doesn't need to be negotiated. You feel lighter because you're no longer dragging yourself through spaces that drain you. Stoicism isn't about dramatic exits, it's about quiet alignment. You step away, you step forward, you keep walking in the direction that respects your inner code, and each time you do, you remind yourself that your peace is not something you beg for, it's something you choose. Lesson 4. Protect your time like it's gold. Most people don't realize how casually they give their life away. Not in dramatic ways, but in small, quiet moments. You say yes when you're tired. You stay longer than you should. You answer messages when your mind is already drained. It doesn't feel like a big deal in the moment, but those moments stack up. By the end of the day, you feel empty and can't quite explain why. That's not because you worked too hard. It's because your time was spent without intention. The Stoics saw time as life itself. Seneca put it plainly, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. When you treat your hours like loose change, they get spent on anything. When you treat them like something rare, your life starts to feel more valuable. There's a strange pressure in modern life to always be available, to reply fast, to show up even when your energy is low, to say yes so you don't disappoint anyone, but availability without boundaries turns into self-neglect. The Stoics believed that your first responsibility is to govern your own inner world. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that his time and attention were part of his moral responsibility. When you let everyone schedule your life for you, you're quietly letting other people decide what your days are worth. And over time, that creates resentment. Not because people asked for your time, but because you didn't protect it. Think about how often you commit to things out of guilt. A meeting that doesn't matter, a conversation that goes in circles, a favor that costs you your peace. You tell yourself it's just this once. But just this once becomes a pattern, and patterns shape your life. Epictetus taught that freedom begins with knowing what is within your control. Your time is one of the few things you actually control. You can't control how people react. You can't control every outcome, but you can decide where your hours go. Every yes is a choice. Every no is also a choice. When you start seeing your schedule as a reflection of your values, your life begins to line up differently. There's also a quiet fear that sits behind wasting time, the fear of missing out, the fear of being left behind, the fear that if you don't stay busy, you'll be forgotten. Carl Jung spoke to this when he said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Busyness can be a distraction from sitting with yourself. Scrolling, overcommitting, staying in noise, it keeps you from noticing what you actually want from your life. When you protect your time, you create space. Space to think, space to feel, space to choose your direction instead of drifting into it. Protecting your time doesn't mean becoming selfish or distant. It means becoming honest about what drains you and what builds you. There are people who leave you feeling clearer after a conversation. There are activities that give you energy instead of taking it. And there are habits that slowly eat your focus without giving anything back. Stoicism asks you to observe these patterns without judgment. Just notice. What strengthens you? What weakens you? Seneca warned that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. The same is true with time. We imagine that saying no will cause drama, but most of the time nothing catastrophic happens. The real damage happens when you keep saying yes to things that don't align with your values. There's power in deciding ahead of time what deserves your hours. When your values are clear, your boundaries become simpler. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. You don't need long justifications for protecting your peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if something is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That same clarity applies to how you spend your time. If something doesn't move you toward the life you respect, it deserves less of your attention. When you live this way, people start to feel the difference around you. Your presence becomes intentional. Your time feels rare, and rare things are treated with more respect. Another shift happens inside you when you guard your time. You start to take yourself more seriously. You stop treating your days like something to get through and start treating them like something to shape. This builds a quiet confidence. You're no longer rushing from one obligation to the next, hoping for a moment to breathe. You're choosing where to place your energy. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You don't become who you truly are by giving your best hours to things that don't matter to you. You become that person by creating space for what does matter, even when it's uncomfortable to do so. This practice also teaches you to slow down. When you stop overloading your schedule, you begin to notice your own rhythms. You realize when you're tired before burnout hits. You recognize when your attention is scattered. The Stoics valued this kind of awareness because it allows you to act with intention instead of habit. Epictetus spoke about training the mind to pause before acting. Protecting your time is one of the simplest ways to practice that pause. You don't have to react to every request. You don't have to fill every empty space. You can let silence exist in your calendar, and that silence becomes fertile ground for clarity. Over time, guarding your time reshapes your entire life. You begin to see that many of your past frustrations weren't about other people at all. They were about how easily you gave yourself away. When you reclaim your hours, you reclaim your direction. You show yourself that your life is not something to be spent carelessly. It's something to be invested wisely. Stoicism teaches that dignity is built through daily choices. Choosing how you spend your time is one of the most powerful of those choices. When you honor your hours, you honor your life. Lesson 5. Speak less, mean more. Most people don't notice how much they talk until they finally sit in a room where no one is rushing to fill the silence. That moment can feel uncomfortable at first. Your mind reaches for words like a reflex. You want to explain, to justify, to prove you're present, to show you matter. But here's the quiet truth. Not every moment needs your voice. Often, the urge to speak isn't about adding value, it's about easing tension inside you. Stoicism invites you to notice that impulse without obeying it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if something is not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. That simple filter changes how you move through conversations. You start asking yourself whether your words are necessary or whether silence would carry more weight. There's power in restraint that most people underestimate. When words are constant, they lose their gravity. Think about the people you respect the most. They usually aren't the loudest in the room. They listen, they observe, and when they speak, people lean in. The Stoics valued this kind of presence because it comes from self-control, not from a need to be noticed. Epictetus taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen more than we speak. That's not just good manners. It's a strategy for clarity. When you listen more, you understand the room better. You pick up on what's really being said, not just what's being performed. And when you finally speak, your words land in the right place instead of scattering into noise. A lot of talking is actually a form of defense. We talk to protect our image. We talk to soften discomfort. We talk to avoid sitting with awkwardness. Psychology points to this pattern too. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." When you resist silence because it feels uncomfortable, you end up filling space with words that don't serve you. But when you allow the discomfort of quiet to exist, it loses its grip. You become less reactive. You don't rush to explain yourself. You don't rush to impress. You start to feel grounded in who you are, even when the room is quiet. That grounded feeling is the beginning of real confidence. This doesn't mean you become distant or cold. It means you become intentional. There are moments when your voice matters deeply, when a boundary needs to be set, when truth needs to be spoken, when someone needs clarity from you. Stoicism isn't about shrinking into silence forever. It's about choosing your moments with care. Seneca wrote that many people speak before they think, and then spend the rest of their time trying to take their words back. We've all been there. A heated comment, a promise made too quickly, a joke that landed wrong. Speaking less gives you space to think. Thinking gives you space to choose. Choosing protects your dignity. Notice how different it feels when you pause before speaking. The breath deepens, the chest relaxes, the rush fades. In that pause, you're not just choosing words, you're choosing who you want to be in that moment. The Stoics believed that character is revealed in small choices made under pressure. When you don't let emotion rush your mouth, you show yourself that you can carry intensity without spilling it onto others. That's strength. Quiet strength. The kind that doesn't need applause to feel real. There's also something powerful about letting your actions speak. Words can promise anything. Actions take effort. When you speak less, people start watching what you do. Your consistency becomes your message. Your reliability becomes your reputation. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that people are shaped by their habits, not by their speeches. When your behavior aligns with your values, you don't need to announce your worth. It shows up in how you treat people, how you handle pressure, and how you walk away from situations that don't respect you. Silence can also be a boundary. Not every comment deserves a reply. Not every opinion deserves your energy. When you respond to everything, you teach people that they can reach into your inner world whenever they want. Stoicism teaches that your attention is one of the few things you truly control. When you guard it, you protect your peace. Epictetus spoke about the freedom that comes from not being easily provoked. That freedom grows when you don't feed every spark with words. Sometimes the strongest answer is no answer at all. Not because you're avoiding something, but because you're choosing not to let it live rent-free in your mind. Psychology adds another layer here. We often talk too much because we want to be understood. We want others to see our side, our intention, our pain. Carl Jung noted that, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When you rely on constant explanation to feel understood, you're looking outside for validation. When you become comfortable with fewer words, you start understanding yourself more clearly. You stop outsourcing your sense of worth to reactions. You become your own anchor. That inner anchor is what allows you to stay calm when you're misunderstood and steady when you're judged. As you practice speaking less and meaning more, something subtle changes in your presence. You don't feel the need to fill every gap. You don't rush to prove your intelligence. You don't scramble to defend every choice. Your energy becomes quieter but stronger. People feel that. Conversations slow down around you. Your words carry more weight because they come from intention, not impulse. Seneca once wrote that the wise person's speech is measured, not because they lack thoughts, but because they value them. When you value your thoughts, you choose carefully which ones deserve to be spoken. This is a skill you build in small moments. The next time you feel the urge to jump into a conversation, pause. The next time you want to explain yourself to someone who isn't really listening, take a breath. The next time silence feels awkward, let it be awkward for a few seconds longer. Over time, those small pauses become a way of living. You start to trust your presence without words. You begin to see that you don't need to perform to be respected. Stoicism teaches that dignity grows when your inner life is not constantly on display, but quietly aligned with your values. When you speak less and mean more, you stop chasing importance. You become important by the way you carry yourself. If you take one thing with you from this, let it be this. Your words shape your life, but your restraint shapes your power. Every time you choose intention over impulse, you step closer to the person you respect in the mirror. That's how quiet strength is built. One deliberate moment at a time. If this spoke to you, don't stop here. Watch one of the suggested videos on your screen and keep sharpening your mind and discipline. Thank you for being part of Psychresto Mind.